All right. Liz, you're going to start us off?
I'm going to go ahead and start everybody off. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for your time. I am Jennifer Love. I'm the Assistant Chief of Staff of the college. So I work closely with President Ensign and the President's staff, as well as the Board of Trustees, and with the Carlisle newly formed since Margee's arrival, but much more hands-on over the course of the pandemic. So the Community Action Network. So I'm excited for our panelists and for Margee to talk about the work that they've done and the impact that it's had on the Carlisle community. So I don't want to steal any of the thunder. I will go ahead and turn it over to President Ensign.
Thanks, Jen, and thanks all of you for being with us today. It's exciting to see so many of you joining us for a good discussion and questions. Let me start by thanking Jen Love. She has the hardest job, I think, in the college, trying to keep me organized along with Karen. And now we've taken on CAN, which is inspiring, the work that everybody's doing in the community, but it's a lot of extra work. So thank you, Jen, really appreciate it. So a couple questions have come in. I'm just gonna do some introductory remarks and then introduce our panelists who are here. In fact, let me do that first. Let me start with our wonderful panelists who are all alums. And when you ask the question, how did CAN come to be? It's really because we have these great alums working in the community, doing civic engagement, civic action that's really inspiring. So Bob Weed, class of 1980, Bob Wade. He graduated in political science and psychology. I did not know his parents, Bob and Florence Weed, were members of the Dickinson class of 1952. He played football and rugby. He has an MBA from AU, and he was a banker for, I think, 30 plus years, Bob. And then he volunteered and was a treasurer of Project Share, and then was asked to serve as CEO and is doing just extraordinary work in our community. So thank you, Bob. Becca Raley, class of 1994, American Studies and Education double major, member of Wheel and Change. She earned an MA in sociology at Temple, and she's the executive director of Partnership for Better Health. So, look at who you've got in front of you there. Food security and health, right? What's more important in a community? Ellie Park, class of 2011, English major, education minor, and her wonderful son is waving at us. She is a beloved already Carlisle High School English teacher, right? And she's the president of the union over there, doing real important work. And finally, Jay Layman, class of 71, geology major. He also graduated from Dickinson School of Law. He was the founder and CEO of Capital Associates. Now, well, you're not retired, Jay. It says you're retired, but you're not. You're also a member of the Carlisle United Methodist Church. So all of you alums on this call, be proud of them because they're all doing extraordinary work in our community. So the questions, I'll just start with this and then we'll turn to each of them. How did CAN come to be and how did the shift occur when COVID-19 occurred, and some of the recent events with our public health campaign, which we are launching next Wednesday, right, Jen? So if any of you are near Carlisle, we hope you will join us. So all of you alums know Dickinson has a really long history in civic engagement with our community. So I inherited really important work that was ongoing. It's really one of the reasons I came to Dickinson from Nigeria, both our leadership in global education and sustainability, but I had to be at a place where people cared about their community. I had left a region of the world that was overwhelmed by violence and famine. And our little community out there launched something called the Adamawa Peace Initiative. And out there, the major leaders weren't so much bankers and lawyers, but they were religious leaders. So we gathered all the Muslim and Christian leaders and kind of put everybody to work, and we were able to feed about 300,000 refugees. And so when I came to Dickinson, I just wanted to expand and build on all the great work that was going on here. And lo and behold, we have these incredible alums in front of us. So we had started 3 years ago, really, talking about how we deal with housing shortages and food insecurity. We weren't focused, Becca, so much then on health outcomes. We sure had to turn to that. And Ellie, education. But then I will always remember, I don't know how many of you were in my dining room, my living room that day. We've been meeting at my house, the president's house, having these great breakfasts and just really enjoying getting to know each other and trying to figure out what we needed to work on. And I will always remember that day because the new head of emergency services came and was with Susan Armstrong from the borough, and he laid out some things, and we all realized we were entering a new period. I've had the, I guess, good distinction of having to deal with Ebola in West Africa. So, you know, it was pretty clear this was an unprecedented challenge for all of us. So we literally looked at each other and said, can we keep this going? Can we find a way to keep our work going? And I have to say, after, I don't know, 7-8 months, it's my favorite call of the week. It's the most inspiring hour of my week when we get on this call, and we're not very formal, and people report on what their needs are and if we're making progress in an area. And I've never worked with a group of people, I think the CAN name is the right one, because no one has ever said, whatever challenge we're looking at, we don't have ideas. We can't figure out a way to work on it. It's always 3 or 4 people saying, you know, I'll start a subcommittee, you know, we'll look at, you know, health, we'll look at Ellie, how we help kids after school who need tutoring. So it's an extraordinary group of people, and I know their Dickinson education has really helped them. So I'll just say one more thing and then I'll turn it over to them. You asked about the public health initiative. We're not going to get over this pandemic until communities come together and follow the guidelines, wearing a mask, practicing social distancing. And so when we raise this with our CAN, and it's close to 100 formal members, religious groups, education, health. I mean, you see our alums here, but even our political leadership, our borough council, our state rep, and we said, can we do this? Can we find a way to launch a public health campaign just to get people wearing masks and following the guidance? And again, no one said no. So next week we launch. I've always been hoping we could have those banners down high in Hanover, and we're all going to have them. It's going to say, you know, it'll be about the CAN initiative. We have purchased 2,000 of these masks that say Carlisle CAN, shop safely and learn safely. 120 businesses have lined up with us, and they have signed a pledge that we all wrote together and we all agreed on. That was an interesting editing exercise. And if someone has a poster in their window, then you know they've signed the pledge and they have masks, and you can shop safely there and you can learn safely. So I'm really thrilled about that new initiative, but I'm going to quit talking now and turn it over to, let's start with the way I introduce folks. Bob Weed, you've got a couple questions people have asked you. Why did you become involved, and what's been the greatest impact of your organization, and has our community been changed by CAN? So we'll let you guys address some of those questions. Bob?
Yeah, I when I saw that, when did you become involved? It started when President Ensign arrived in town and looked around and said, what have I gotten myself into? And had everybody come over to her house, and we all met in her living room. And it was a community get to know you meeting. And it was interesting because I think in my recollection, it's probably the first time that group of people had been together in that type of a setting ever that I recall. And it really set the stage for what happened later, which is Carlisle CAN. I'm impressed, and I would echo President Ensign. I look forward to Thursday mornings because it is a real amalgamation of participants. Business community, the Chamber of Commerce, the Cumberland Area Economic Development Corporation is on the phone. We have representation from the faith community. United Way is on the phone, a number of United Way agencies dealing with homelessness, hunger, shelter, on down the list. The police department, the chief of police is on the call every week. Borough council representation is on site, state legislators, the medical community, both UPMC and Sadler Community Health Center are on. We have education represented. And the other thing that impresses me about the group is how agile it is. You think back to, I think back to March, for us as a food pantry, we had been historically doing distribution in person, a modified client choice model where clients and families came into the building, and we'd have 60 volunteers here helping 200-300 client families at a time. And we can't do that anymore. But how agile this entire group has been. When we got together initially as CAN, it wasn't a question of here's, I'm in it for me. The questions were like, what's going on? Let's get the real information, up to the minute information. And that's the beauty of having it weekly. Think about how quickly things keep changing. It was questions like, what supplies do you need to execute your mission right now? Who has them, and how can we get them to you? And as the seasons have changed and progressed, it became like, okay, school's out. Now, what are we going to do about children? Because camps aren't going to open. So how do we address that issue and, take care of children, keep them engaged in a positive way, keep them healthy, happy, and safe over the summer. And we roll into fall, schools opening again. Now, what are the issues? We've gone down pretty much every trail you can think of as they come up. And again, that's kind of my point, is back to the agility of the group. If it's racial tension, we're not afraid to walk into that water and address it. If it's hunger or homelessness, we've been there. If it's daycare for children, we've tread down that road. And the list goes on. I think that's why it's been such a benefit to the community.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks so much. Becca.
Yeah, great. So nice to see so many familiar faces. I agree. This is a surprisingly powerful local network that's been developed. And I think I got involved like everyone else when, as we all know, when you get invited by the president to something, you go. And something kind of exceptional about being invited to her home in the borough on Conway Street. That is such a very warm and engaging kind of invitation. And then, the college has had a really wonderful run of positive outreach to the local community and thinking about community engagement. But I really credit President Ensign for taking that to a whole new level. And Margee, when you came, I remember you talking regularly and with significance about your work at American University and all the challenges you took on there. And every time I have to say, there was this little voice in my head that was like, we don't have Boko Haram here. We don't have a famine. Like, how does that relate to Carlisle? And actually, your experience there and transitioning to how you've engaged a whole host of citizens and community leaders in Carlisle has been extraordinary, beyond anything I could have envisioned and beyond anything we've done before. And I can talk about how it's impacted our organization here at the Partnership for Better Health. We have a great logo and we do wonderful work, but we're a very small organization. We have 4 full-time staff. And if you had told me a year ago that we would become a regular voice of a public health, global public health pandemic for our community here in Carlisle, I would never have believed you. But truly the work of this network has deepened our accountability as an organization to the broader community. And I think our collective accountability and capacity to work together here locally. I love the Thursday calls. I am always humbled by the information that is shared. as a community grant maker, for me, it helps me keep my ear to the ground on rapidly evolving local needs and opportunities. I've made some wonderful new connections and expanded my local network through the inclusive approach that the CAN network has taken. We're always adding new members, always learning new things. And I think since the spring, the Partnership for Better Health has made now over $850,000 in new grants to the community specifically to address COVID-19. And because of the nature of the network, I think our distribution of those grants has been wider and more inclusive, because the network has shared a lot of information about funding just this summer, whether it's the CARES Act funding coming through our partners at the Cumberland-area Economic Development Council, or CARES Act funding coming through the borough, or United Way, our friends there and the funds that they have. I think CAN has also played an important role with public awareness on a host of different issues and related to the pandemic, but also, some of the things we were working on as task forces previously. We had a workforce development and sustainable wages task force that met for over 2 years when CAN was first formed. And Professor Steve Riccio was a very dynamic facilitator of that task force for us. And we had different partners who were engaged. And, I think CAN has been a nice tie for community partners to tap the academic expertise of the college. So I think, Dickinson and Margee, through the kind of leadership you've brought, the relationship between the college and the town is mutually reciprocal, and it's deeply embedded. But all the community partners benefit from the college's success, and the college recognizes its benefits from the town's success. And it's just been very exciting. And Jennifer Love, I want to give a shout out. The kind of role you've played as an administrative backbone to keep this network going week upon week, and follow up with tying all the pieces together. That's been integral. And the college's commitment of some of your time to help make that work. So many good things.
Thank you, Becca. And I certainly agree with that shout out for Jen. Ellie, what are your experiences in thinking about all of this?
Hi, so I think might be the only sort of latecomer to CAN. I was not in the Margee's dining room version of CAN. I would never have been able to, because I am teaching during the breakfast dining room meetings. Right. This is my third year of leading the teachers union for the Carlisle-area school district. And when I took that job over, we have like 350 unionized teachers, and it's a pretty significant position. And the union has been kind of quiet for a long time, which is normally a good thing. And one of the things I wanted to do is to get the union out into the community a little bit more, so that you don't just hear from the union if like we're striking or something like that, like the union is out in the community doing charity work, engaging with other people. People know who we are, people know our name, the teachers are part of this sort of bigger picture of Carlisle. And I think that aligned really nicely to what President Ensign was also doing sort of simultaneously at Dickinson. And I'm not from Carlisle. I don't know how many of you are like true Carlisle transplants like I am. My husband and I met at Dickinson. Neither of us are from Carlisle, and now we both live here. And so we sort of made this transition from Dickinson student to townie in this really interesting way after we graduated, and kind of fell in love with Carlisle. And one of the things we reflected on in the first couple of years that we were living here after we graduated was like, wow, we had no idea how great Carlisle was while we were students at Dickinson. We never shopped at this store, we never went to this place, and we never hiked this trail. And like, what were we doing at Dickinson all those years that we weren't ever leaving campus? So I've been really excited about the opportunities to sort of, now that I'm so invested in Carlisle and the town of Carlisle and the students of Carlisle, to come back to Dickinson and say, okay, well, how about I take all my students to the Trout Gallery? And how about this professor comes in and speaks to my classes? And I never have any trouble finding people who want to work with my students. Every Dickinson professor I've ever asked has said yes. I never have a hard time making those connections. But I think that's really powerful because we can kind of weave those pieces together. So this summer, when it became abundantly clear that we were going to need more childcare for these students because Carlisle School District was going to have to make this incredibly challenging decision not to bring our students back full time. And we knew that that was going to disproportionately impact students of color and socioeconomically disadvantaged students in Carlisle. And I wanted the union, because the union was advocating for that. The union was advocating for the safe and ethical decisions to make our teachers safe, to ensure that we were doing safe things. We're advocating to not bring students back 5 days a week. So I also wanted us to be a part of a childcare solution. Teachers aren't childcare. We're more than that, but we recognize that not having kids in school presents childcare crises. So I reached out to like a whole bunch of people this summer and I was like, we need to pop something up so that there can be childcare. And that was when somebody said, you should reach out to Margee and you should reach out to CAN because this is the kind of issue that CAN would get behind. And that's how I came into CAN. So I was like on sort of like whatever vacation actually was this summer. I had a week off. And on a Zoom and sort of meeting all of these like heavy hitters in Carlisle that I never imagined would all be in a room a Zoom room together. And sort of, it was exactly like Margee was saying a couple of minutes ago. Like everybody was like, ooh, what about this? And what about this organization? And have you applied for this grant? And well, have you worked with these people? And at the end of the day, the program we ended up putting together got like over $300,000 from the CARES Foundation. And we were able, I'm sorry about my dogs. We were able to provide, we have 3 dogs, they're all rescues and they're really loud. We were able to provide childcare for well over 100 students in Carlisle completely for free, including meals and all kinds of other things. And that childcare is continuing and happening right now. And that happened partially because of CAN and because of what we're doing. So I unfortunately am back to teaching in the classroom. So I've been missing the CAN meetings because they're at 9 in the morning on Thursdays, but I'm still connected. I read all of Jen's emails and I'm super passionate about the work we're doing and I want to continue to be a part of pushing it forward. And as always, trying to get the union involved in as many things as possible so that it can be more than just a labor advocacy group.
Thanks, Ellie. Thanks for all your good work. And finally, Jay.
Well, thank you, Margee. Well, I see my classmate Pierce Brown's here, so we're the old guys on the call. But Ellie, I'm like you. I'm a latecomer to CAN, but you know, I have a long history, not as publicly as some of my neighbors, and certainly as many of the people on the CAN call being out publicly doing things in Carlisle, but I come professionally out of a political grassroots public policy advocacy base. And so number one, I'm always interested in groups that are willing to, you know, try and tackle difficult issues. When I heard about CAN, it was with regard to the anti-racist task force part of CAN, and Becca and I were talking, you know, one day just about things in town, and I used to be on the partnership board, so we check in every now and then with each other. And she said, you know, you really ought to check out CAN. And the other reason for that was, for those of you who, you know, remember Allison United Methodist Church on campus. Well, after I graduated in '71, I actually cycled back around. My wife, late wife, Karen Engel Layman, was named pastor of that church in 1994. So, you know, we came back to living in the Carlisle-area. And long story short, I've spent the last 26 years of my life now trying to merge and support United Methodism in Carlisle, which has just recently come to fruition with a couple of years ago, the formal merger of the 3 United Methodist churches in town. And now in just the last 2 months, the opening of our new facility out on South Spring Garden Street, and the sale really of all 3 churches. One, obviously, Allison went to the campus. Grace United Methodist Church is almost sold. The settlement hasn't occurred yet, but it will be turned into some sort of residential unit. And then the First United Methodist Church was sold to another church. So part of our mission of Carlisle United Methodist Church is to continue to reach out and build bridges to the community in very specific ways. And we're particularly concerned with the racial issues, the gender equality issues, and reaching communities in this area that maybe have not felt welcome to come in under those bases. So for me, it's an opportunity to re-engage with some people that I've certainly known or heard of for many years. And it's also, to support the college. Pierce will well remember kind of interactions that we had as students with trustees and access to administration folk. I think there's always been an excellent, rapport there on campus. And some of the trustees and some of the alums, Jimmy George comes to mind from George's Flowers, was a person I met, my freshman year. I don't even remember how anymore, but he kind of introduced me to, people in town and kind of made it an accessible environment. And I never felt this town gown tension, at least with respect to me. We certainly had some town gown issues in those years, but I've always been impressed by the college's willingness and importance to the community. And as it's changed with the loss of all these businesses and jobs and the transition that so many areas are experiencing throughout the country, the college has become an incredible economic generator. And with someone like you, Margee, and I'll just echo what other people have been saying, your facilitation and leadership, I realize you're not doing it all, but I think you are uniquely situated to support how that group functions. And nobody will ever say no to you. I've observed that a number of times now, and yet smile is just a killer smile. So, we're all responding. And again, Jen and Liz Toth and some of the Amir Ahmed, some of the people that you have brought on board and, putting your money where your mouth is, purchasing masks and the signage downtown to support the campaign is just one more unique demonstration of the role that Dickinson plays and how you draw people and how we engage people. So I think it's absolutely unique. I've always felt comfortable in Carlisle. A little bit, sometimes we would tease, it's like being back in the 50s, but it really isn't. And, there are just a lot of concerned people. And the thing about CAN that really strikes me the most is everybody wants to see something happen locally. We know we're not always in a position to do something statewide or nationally, but we know we can come together as a community and do something locally. And it's a very diverse group, diverse politically. But we're not doing it on a political basis. And I think it's a wonderful role model for other communities. And I hope, whatever you're doing and we can do to promote it, we'll send it in that direction for other people to use.
Well, thanks, Jay, and all of you for your really thoughtful observations. I did want everybody to know our students are deeply engaged also. I mean, usually they're out, with Project Share and Partnership for Better Health and, doing lots of things. But once the pandemic began, the wonderful director of our new Center for Civic Learning and Action, which we established 2 years ago, I think, almost 2 years ago now, with some money from a Mellon Foundation grant, Gary Kirk, he started what he calls the Civic Action Internships. 25 major projects have been completed, including computer science students helping businesses get websites up when this started so they could, sell things. Business students helping write CARES Act and other proposals so people could get some money in, and lots of digital and online tutoring. So our students are deeply engaged. In fact, there were more who wanted to participate in those virtual internships than we could handle at the beginning. So I think that's a good summary of who we are and what we're doing. And I'm so proud of all of our Dickinson alums, especially these 4 who just spoke. And Jay, you talked about board members. We've got at least 2 on. There were 3. Doug Pauls, Doug wave there, so everybody sees you. And Marjorie Spears, who I don't think has her video on. Laura Colony was on for a little bit. So we've got a few board members on too. And of course, Judge Madelyn and all sorts of folks and his wife, Deb. So let's take your questions.
Margee, I believe there's a question in the chat. I don't know if you can see
Oh,
that.
good. Okay, Donna, let's see, where's Donna? Oh, is that Pierce?
It's with Pierce.
Pierce, also known as Donna. Okay. Pierce, first of all, we have underrepresented groups, a very diverse group on the CAN. All right. I think we've, folks have talked about that. It isn't just the business. It isn't just education. Partly, one of the most exciting things that's just happened is many of the Black pastors have joined. But interestingly, and I don't know if you guys followed that, as soon as that happened, we realized not all of them had technology. So we quickly wrote a proposal to our little emergency response fund that United Way has been coordinating for us, so we could get all of them, iPads or something, so they could be connected with us. So that was kind of an eye opener, right? That, oh my gosh, right? Of course, it's right in front of us, the inequity. But with the events of this summer, the tragic events, but also the hope, I think, that's emerged from that. Dickinson had just hired a nationally known expert in diversity and inclusivity, Amer Ahmed. And when he came, we asked him if he would begin some work with CAN. So we have an anti-racism working group. It began with really education and people doing a lot of reflection on themselves and how they saw the world. And now Jeff Cabellis, who's the pastor at Second Presbyterian, and Jay and others are getting ready to move forward with recommending some initiatives for us. But that's what I love. And I think Bob talked about it, the agility. As soon as we realized there are people we really want a part of this who can't participate because they don't have the technology. And within a week, a proposal was written, was approved, we got the technology. So we can move fast. There's a lot of work to do in Carlisle with diversity. There's a woman who's on that. Jay, you know who I'm talking about. In the first meeting, we went around and just said, why do you want to do this? Black woman retired. And she said, my children have left Carlisle because of the discrimination they felt. I want my grandchildren to feel comfortable here. I thought, whoa, we have so much work to do. So, we probably should be moving faster with some of those things, but it's a really good group working on that. And like every community, we have important work ahead of us. So yes, Pierce, also known as Donna, we're working in that area. Thanks.
And
Thank you, Margee.
Oh, sorry.
That was actually Donna's question, but I'm very interested in your answer as well.
Yeah. Other questions, Jen, that you have, or?
No, I was.
So Franya Perry from Hope Station also sits on the CAN, and Hope Station does a report at CAN every week. So that there's also on all of her good work with students of color in Carlisle.
Absolutely.
And the work that she's doing on the chamber was what I was going to bring up, Margee,
Yes.
that they're working on looking at businesses, Black-owned businesses, and creating mentorships, and also providing opportunities for starting new businesses for that community as well. So there's a whole community or a whole group that's working on that together.
Yeah, Jen's right. And some of you on this call might even want to help because the Black-owned businesses, have the least access, whether it's to finance, to training, lots of things in our community. So that group is really has put together a good proposal. We're shopping it around a little bit to folks, but that's the kind of support that's needed, not just the financial, but the training. Some of you are retired business people with just great knowledge who could really help that effort, I think. So, thanks, Jen.
Margee, I would piggyback onto that one of the things that I have learned, I have a grandson who is biracial and was adopted from South Africa. and he lives in Mechanicsburg, but does work in Camp Hill and central Pennsylvania. You know, he's regularly discriminated against. I mean, whether it's comments or you know, just behaviors or negative things thrown his way. And you know, I wasn't immune to that fact that people of color experience it, but it certainly hits home, you know, when it's a family member. And even within the can, there have been moments of shock for me that when we talk about, you know, some issues like that, racial issues, people have expressed, not a lot, but, you know, certainly the comment has been made, well, do you think people of color in Carlisle are really intimidated? You know, are they going to be afraid to go vote? Are they, you know, do they have concerns when they shop? And to a lot of people's credit, everyone many people on the call said, well, yeah, that's the way it is. And Sofrania certainly made that aware. But I guess the point I'm getting to is there are a lot of different conversations that need to occur beyond just action. I mean, we're just talking relationship building across some of these divides. And I think, you know, CAN is a way to help guide those conversations and encourage them, you know, without people feeling like, wow, I really blew that, or gee, I'm making the situation worse because I'm not aware of that. So I think just the fact that there is.
Oh, we lost you, Jay.
I'm sorry. This group will become better and better known, particularly by the time you're done with the mask presentation next week. And I think it will give hope to people that, hey, there's a place I can go. If I have a question or concern, let me, or I'll find somebody on CAN, I'll ask them and I'll raise it to the group. And so to me, that's one of the most powerful aspects of it. It is, you know, it is individually based, but it's supported by people who are really committed to the community. And other than me and a few others, they're really running organizations. I mean, I'm representing an organization and certainly have, you know, influence in it, but I'm not running programs. But you know, it's a way to relieve pressure if the issues aren't being addressed, and to begin to act or figure out a way to act on them.
I think, Jay, you raise an important point. I think we cross lots of divides in our country right now, including the political one. We do have, you know, representatives of both parties. We have the police chief on, who's very active and really helping us understand some of the issues that he's facing. So for me, that's another really encouraging part is, you know, just getting people who have very different perspectives, very different experiences, and as Jay says, learning from each other. So what other questions, comments do you folks have?
Feel free to unmute and ask or type in the chat.
Yeah.
I have a question. I'll become a Carlisle resident and alumna here for a moment. What are the plans as you move towards spring, and knowing that, you know, our numbers are increasing, concerns about, you know, is additional CARES funding coming or not coming? How are we going to be able to continue this work and continue aiding the community as we get into spring, not knowing if there'll be the availability for things for children and in the same kind of initiatives?
Well, I think one of the things, and Bob and Becca talked about it, is we find where there's pockets of money, right? And so, you know, having the KDEC, the county people on, we're getting updates every week on, you know, here's a pile of money, here's when you have to apply. So I think that sharing of information has been really important. And secondly, in the midst of this, one of our Dickinson alums who's up on the Hill, who is helping to write the CARE legislation, reached out to me. I had met him once, and he said, I know you've got this community thing going. I'm really proud of it. What difference is CARES money having there? So it was just such a great opportunity to write him a long note and reflect on what everybody told me and say, this is working, but we're not getting any of this. And we began a fairly regular dialogue. He said, we don't get out of DC, we wouldn't know any of this. So actually, I asked at the last meeting, I said to everybody, let's reflect on why the second or the third round of CARES money is so important to us. And we're going to put together a note and send that to him. You know, who knows if it'll make a difference, but I think it will, having done some work on the Hill. The people writing the legislation are the most important, and they're not usually the elected people, right? And so he's helping to draft this next round. So I think that's a really important question, Liz, because we need that new funding for everything we're talking about, whether it's food security or health or education or, you know, racial justice, supporting businesses. So, you know, that's going to be important. The information sharing alone, I think, is valuable. I'll let others comment on that. But when our KDEC head comes in and says, you know, there's X amount of money, here's how you write the grant, that's really helpful. So we hope that we will continue to have sources of funds like that going forward.
Yeah, and just building on that too, though, I mean, it's an interesting question, and I agree with you, Margee. We'll keep moving forward, but I think the other thing that CAN has done is it's made us keenly aware of how many resources we have locally and how much we can do locally. We are eager to, you know, continue to advocate for a, you know, stimulus part two. But I think the network has given us all some confidence. I mean, this pandemic is hard. I think about all of our partners, you know, these 100-some people, and so many of us were so isolated right now, right? And so, you know, my office is semi-remote. A lot of people are still 100% remote. Were it not for this network, I think there would be probably a greater sense of despair. But, you know, this group has been so action-oriented and has recognized, you know, even the smallest wins matter. And when I have a local question, I know exactly who to call. That's been really, really powerful. So we'll continue to march forward and evolve with whatever the challenges of the day bring.
And we've also, Liz, as you know, we raised some money on our own. At the very beginning, when it was clear this was just, we were facing, you know, massive challenges. I can't remember, Becca, maybe you can, how much our little, you know, emergency response fund that United Way, you know, put together. I think it was like 150,000 or something. And boy, 120, have we been careful? I mean, we have these, you know, hour-long meetings even for $10,000 or $15,000, but we know it's going to make a difference, and we don't have, you know, unlimited resources. In fact, we're close to being out. But it was also, I think we all learned where the challenges were by the proposals that came in. You know, people getting ready to be evicted at the beginning, you know, just trying to find a little money for hotel rooms for them, you know, for food. Bob would jump in and provide food. So even that effort of, you know, having some funds and having people apply, we heard from folks, I think, that we weren't connected with before. Another question, is there some place where info on who is on it can be found and what projects and what difference is being made? That's, again, it's either a Donna or a Pierce question. We have a list of everyone. You know, we've been moving so fast, Pierce, we haven't been able to really document all the outcomes. And I think that's important. But since we're still in this crisis, I think all of us every week, we are still faced with what's the new challenge? Where are we with our task forces? What are they accomplishing? So I hope at some point, I mean, we've got all of the information because Jen has kept such good records and minutes, and we've got all of that. We should collectively probably write something, because you know, to sort of gather that information, I think would be important. But you know, right now it's just, we're still very much every week taking on whatever is right in front of us.
Margee,
I have a quick comment.
Yeah.
I don't, am I unmuted? So it dawns on me, I'm just sort of coming in from the outside to see this for the first time, but it seems to me, as you're talking and telling your stories and you're telling about how this happened and the progress you've made and the successes you've had, and you just mentioned documenting the notes or documenting the minutes and that sort of thing. It seems to me that it would be wonderful to, before it's all sort of lost in the dust of how this group came together and then how that group was positioned to handle this pandemic and what Carlisle's been through over the last 7 months in a very important way, I think. And to document that, I'm thinking Dickinson students, I'm thinking high school students, I'm thinking, to sort of let them be involved in some kind of getting your testimonies. Each one of you have sort of told a story about, how this impacted your organization, how you see it impacting Carlisle in a personal way. And out of that, I think the younger people, students and whatnot, listening to your stories, I think is an important transfer of information. One, it documents what you've done. People can look at that. Students could get ideas. They might be able to sort of sum that up. So that's one thing. I think sort of an oral history approach would be just get the interviews, get somebody to start interviewing each and every one of you, and get those tapes done. And then, that can come together with all kinds of other documentation and things. And that way, when we look back on this time, this past, in a year from now, and we look back on how did an action network in a small community come together? And by piecing people's stories and ideas together, I think you can have a really powerful documentation. And then you can kind of let people see that, whether it's a documentary or something. The person in DC, we don't know about this, but that's the kind of thing that could be very powerful in people looking back on this. One other comment, Jay, I also have grandchildren that are biracial and living in Carlisle. It is a very difficult, process, I think, having watched that. I'm sure you can relate, as a person growing up in white and whatever, and then to watch our grandchildren maneuver through a community such as Carlisle and things that happened. And also, even if it doesn't happen to them, watching it happen to others. And I think, for instance, my grandson's pretty old, way past the time he should get a license. I always wonder, why is he not getting a license? How does Carlisle come together in some other way to start to change that narrative? Are they afraid to get a license because what they see is you'll lose your license? It's very difficult to get it back. So many of people that they see of color have lost their licenses because of misdemeanors or infractions. And so, or will they get picked up? Maybe the police chief has, something, a program or something that could be done to help persons of colors in this community start to understand that they could freely walk around. They could get in their car and drive someplace, and something that they see on television that happened in Chicago or Philadelphia isn't going to happen to them here in Carlisle. And how do we reassure them? So that's just another kind of initiative, because it was sort of brought up as something that I guess you guys are sort of looking at and exploring.
Well, those are really helpful comments. On the interviews, I think we've begun it, but it would be great to embed that in a class, as you say. In fact, when we're in session, students are doing amazing work with some of our partners. Bob, I remember the food security survey that was done in a class by students. So I think that's a really good suggestion. And, thanks for your heartfelt comments. The chief of police, who is a person of color, wants to do these things. He's so committed to Carlisle. And I think all of us who are CAN members, we talked right before the pandemic. He was working on his program with youth, and we need to support him more in that work and find ways, I think, to bring him in more in some of those projects. But Jay, it looks like you wanted to say something.
Well, I have two comments. One, I think everyone on CAN sees this time as an inflection point to really make a difference on some of these bigger issues that have been festering for a while. And I have been very motivated, I guess, by kind of those conversations and desires to, see things happen differently. You know, Carlisle has an interesting, you know, racial history. Some things I was astounded to find out as I begun my research. But, you know, we're not going to live in the past always. And we're beginning to acknowledge that in some significant ways, even as recently, you know, as in the last week here with a resolution apologizing for really essentially the desecration of a Black cemetery here in town. And so number one, I think people believe that we can make a difference this time. The other comment, and it goes to, I guess it was Margee's, you know, about documenting things, but it jogs my memory that one of the, or Madelyn, I'm sorry, Madelyn's comment, this is not really an informal organization. And it has only held together, in my opinion, you know, through the support of the college. I want to reemphasize that. And I'm not sure what it means for the long term. I joined not because of COVID. I joined because of the desire that I heard, you know, to address some of these other longstanding issues in town, which bespeaks of some entity that is going to, you know, be around to be able to do that. I think, and what that looks like, I don't know. Nobody, I guess, is angling to be you know, have another organization, but there needs to be some kind of thought at some point given to a framework, you know, to continue this, or else acknowledge the reality that it's going to be an initiative of the college in terms of undergirding some of the basic support with everyone else continuing to do the kinds of things they're doing. But it's a marvelous thing that has occurred. But I think because people believe now is the time to make a difference on some of these issues.
You're right, Jay.
I may just
Becca.
build very quickly on that comment. And for the college, you know, trustees who are on this, thank you so much to you and to you, Margee, for lending your leadership to this effort. I very much hope it, you know, it continues, and I know it will as an evolving part of the college's commitment to the local community. But, you know, the reality is here we all are in a pandemic. The college has enormous, you know, and extraordinary, you know, daily challenges of working through how it functions at this time and engages so many different, you know, students and alums and populations and faculty and staff. And Margee, you know, your personal commitment at this time to weekly guide and lead us has been just phenomenal. And I know it will evolve. We began meeting quarterly or something, you know, and we'll get through this press point. But really, I've personally learned so much from your leadership, your, you know, sense of delegation, your grace, your cheerleading of others. You know, I think we've all grown from just being able to be in a Zoom with you. And so thank you for that.
Thank you, Becca. But honestly, it's just, it's a group of people, alums, who are using their Dickinson education for the betterment of our community. And so for me, with the challenges internally, it's just a joy to be with everyone who says, how do we take this on? How do we do it? You know, who's the best? You know, I mean, no one ever says no, right? And so I really attribute that, so much of that, to, you know, your work at Dickinson. And, you know, I'm thrilled that we have now a center. Our third pillar is civic learning and action. And so I think that's really important as we go forward. We've got this center, we've got some funding for it. We have a director and, you know, and an assistant director, and they're so well trained and to carry this forward no matter what happens. So I don't see Dickinson's role lessening here. I just think once we get out of this pandemic, we really have to do some strategic thinking about, okay, what are the big issues now we want to work on together, and you know, and how do we do that, and what are our timelines? So I see a natural progression here, Jay, but, you know, we're not out of a crisis. We're probably at the worst point. We're just entering the worst point of this. So, you know, it's just a privilege to work with the people on the can and try to get some stuff done.
Well, I think it's important for the trustees to also understand, like Becca was saying, that, you know, we were all on campus at different points in time. Carlisle has changed tremendously. The campus is twice the size it is when I was there. The programming is, you know, completely different. I mean, the college has evolved to the point that, you know, it really is a world-class institution. It's not a small regional, you know, liberal arts college, but I didn't fully appreciate until really recently when I understood how many people were laid off from the, you know, the college community because students aren't there. I mean, the economic generator or engine that the college is just financially, and then the intellectual or intellectual resources that it brings to issues like this, I think is the highest it's probably ever been. And it's wonderful because it's excellent town-gown relations, but I know it will take a lot of work to sustain that because of the primary goal you have of educating students, not, you know, building up the town. But with no good town, you don't have good students who want to come here either. So it is a challenge, but it's amazing how the college has evolved. You all should be real proud of the leadership at the trustee level in particular. Thank you.
Thanks. And Ellie, I know you've got to get off for another call. Thank you for all the great work you're doing.
Thank you so much. Sorry for the quarantine, but we appreciate it.
Thanks, Ellie. Take care.
Discuss school closures. Thank you.
Thanks. See you Thursday. If you can.
Where is everybody?
Bye.
He's adorable.
Well, just one last comment on what you said, Jay. I don't see the two inseparable. I think students learn so much by being involved with these community partnerships, seeing different perspectives on the world and trying to figure out how to work with partners to solve problems. So, you know, I don't see a big distinction there. I think that's a big part of our job as educators, especially right now with what we're facing. We have to make sure we're educating young people who have the knowledge and skills and ability to work across difference. That's what we're doing. We come from very different backgrounds and experiences on the CAN. And I'm hoping when we're back to some sense of normality, which is going to be a while, but we will have students back, and you know, half of them in January, and then we'll flip and have the other half in March. And so we hope we can find ways to, you know, deepen our partnerships with all of you. All right.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Yes. All right.
Thanks, everybody. You know what? Before oh, he just got off. I was going to introduce you to Carlo, our new VP of but I think he just got off. So I hope you can all meet him soon. Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Thank you, Margee.
Bye now.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks for having this.
Thank you.